And now is the time for the affirmative cross-examination of negative. Mr. Albrecht, you have 20 minutes to cross-examine Turretin. You may begin when you're ready.
Turretin, I noticed in your opening statement that you mentioned that Josephus provides a list. I'm curious, what are the books that Josephus lists in the canon of Scripture of the Jews?
He lists, I want to say, I don't have his entire list memorized, but my recollection is that he lists everything except Esther, but in the process he combines some books, which is sort of one of the practices of the day.
Turretin, are you sure that in Josephus' list that he actually mentions that he's combined certain books, or is that a mere assumption of yours?
Well, it's certainly not merely of mine, but it is an inference that's drawn from listing the first book of, for example, in the case of Jeremiah, listing Jeremiah without listing Lamentations is taken as being listing Jeremiah with Lamentations. Certainly, if someone was looking for absolute proof that that's what he meant, it might be quite hard to produce.
So your position is that Josephus does enumerate the books of his list. Am I correct?
When you say enumerate, he gives. I think I'm trying to remember now what his lists, what the actual words that he used in this Antiquities of the Jews was. I think he used a number.
Yeah,
and then
you're correct.
Which those,
yeah, he gives
listed which books those were.
Right, he gives the number 22, but again, this is a question, and I'm cross-examining you, so I won't go into greater detail, but I'll simply say that Josephus does not list the books that are within the number 22. I was trying to get you to give me a list, because in your opening you said that he provides a list, and it is my contention that he indeed does not provide a comprehensive list of what all the 22 books are. Okay, well, I'll pass that question over. Turretin, is the ancient Jewish canon identical to that of Protestantism, or what you would consider the ancient Jewish canon?
Yes, if I thought that Jesus had a different Old Testament canon than I did, I'd change my canon to match what Jesus had. That's the reason I accept the canon that I use, because I think it's the same one Jesus had.
Can you give me a positive proof of that? Can you give me an ancient source that shows that the ancient Jewish canon is identical to yours, basically, to the Protestant one?
You mean like an ancient list of a Hebrew list where it comes out exactly?
No, you can give me one early person. You don't have to give me an ancient list. That's fine.
Well, an early person who has the same exact list,
right?
Without combining books.
Well, specifically, even if he combines books, it really doesn't matter. Specifically, without referencing, obviously, a Christian wouldn't be in tune with this argument, because I'm asking for an ancient Jewish canon identical to yours. So it doesn't matter if he combines books. I just want to know if you can give me one person. That's all I really want.
Well, I can't think of any Jewish lists.
Well, I'm not necessarily a list. Maybe a person, a rabbi, or any individual. I just want a single source prior to the time of Christ, or even during Christ's lifetime, that lists the current Protestant books as Scripture.
Well, they're not just Protestant books. I mean, everybody
obviously,
agrees
of course. Oh yeah, I'm referring to the fact that relegating the canon to that of Protestantism. That's what I meant when I said that.
Yeah, I can't recall offhand a specific person in the first century who debates the subject, except for the Jamnia era Jews, which would be, I'm assuming, too late for what your question is asking.
What about the second century? What about the second century? So you would list Josephus as one person?
Well, he's a person who rejects these Deuterocanonicals.
And if Josephus, if you can't list the books that Josephus lists in his listing of Scripture, how do you know that he rejects the Deuterocanonical books?
in other words, your question is
if you're unable to give me the catalog of books that Josephus uses, my question is, how can you contend that he rejects every single deuterocanonical book?
And I guess there's a couple ways that you could come to that conclusion. One is the use of this numbering system, the fact that he gives a number of the books.
Right, but that number excuse me, yep. that number would not coincide with that of Protestantism. The normal number that the Protestants use, as Mr. White has even pointed out, is 24, and Josephus lists 22. So that's why my question is, if you can't list the books that Josephus calls canon of Scripture, how are you certain that he rejected the deuterocanonical books, every single one?
Well, I mean, again, I think, let's say we said if he lists fewer than the number of that you believe we should be looking for, there's 24, instead of 24 he lists 22. I don't see how it's even possible he could be listing all the deuterocanonical on that list. But perhaps I've misunderstood your question.
Well, let me phrase it a little simpler. Okay, you would agree, as James White and pretty much any Protestant that takes this position says, you would agree that the number, that we're looking for is 24. So when we see the number 22 in Josephus, you would definitely be of the persuasion that he must have lumped some books together. My question is, if we don't know what books he lumped together, or we don't really even know what books he's enumerating here, how can you be certain that he rejected all or really any of the deuterocanonical books?
The way that one would obtain that type of information by looking at other people with lists that are of similar length to see which ones are included in short 22 or 24 length lists, and that would be one way that we would go about doing it. So if you take the example of Athanasius, his 22 book list was Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel as 1st and 2nd Kings, 3rd and 4th Kings as what we would call 1st and 2nd Kings.
Right, I understand. I understand, but my question was an ancient Jewish source. I wasn't specifically dealing with Athanasius, but I'll move on to another question if that's all right with you. Turton fan, on one of Mr. White's videos, and even on his blog, he has taken the position that at the Council of Trent, that there was only a 44% approval rating for the books, that obviously the deuterocanonical books. Do you hold to this same position?
There's some record circulating of what the vote was at Trent. And the vote, if you tabulate the vote based on the number of people voting for, people voting against, and abstentions or non-votes, I believe that number did come out to 44%. But I could be mistaken about that. I don't have those numbers in front of me.
Oh, you're correct. The vote is definitely 44%. But I'm curious if you're aware that the 44% vote had nothing at all to do with the canon, and was rather in regards to dealing with the anathema.
Well, the only value of the anathema has to do with whether or not it's going to be attached to the canon.
Well, I would agree with you. I think it's great that you point that out. But the fact of the matter is, this was a straw vote. It wasn't even, in conciliar matters. So my question to you is, well, basically, I guess since we've already covered that, I simply wanted to go over that. I was wondering if your position was the same as Mr. White's, and I'm unsure. I don't know if you still hold to that. Do you still believe that the 44% vote dealt with the canon specifically?
Yes. The reason that the anathema is significant, perhaps it's good that you gave me this chance to explain. The reason that the anathema is significant, as I'm sure you must be familiar with, in your church's system, there's an important difference between a council just saying something, like the Council of Florence did, and the council attaching an anathema to denial of a particular position, like Trent did. One is a doctrinal and dogmatic definition, and another one has still a significant status, but a lower status. It's not it doesn't have the same level of significance, for example, that when Trent speaks about something, if Trent doesn't attach an anathema to it, as when Trent does attach an anathema to it. And this decision to canonize the canon is sort of a double entendre there, I guess, but to canonize the canon is what had the 44%. It's not as though there were two lists sitting there, one got 44%, the other one got 56%, and somehow the 44% won.
So even though the official documents from the Council of Trent, from the Council Fathers, show that the vote on the canon was unanimous, and that this 44% vote wasn't even in regards to the issue of the canon, you still hold to this position nevertheless, am I correct?
Well, when you say this position, do you mean the position that they 44%?
I mean the position that the 44% had to do with the canon.
That it has to do with the canon because
Yes.
it has to do with the definition of the canon.
It actually had nothing to do with the definition of the canon. It had to do with the anathema. But my question is, even though the official documents from Trent show that this vote wasn't even in conciliar matters, it was a straw vote, you still hold to the fact, to your contention that this was in regards to the canon. Am I correct?
Well, it seems as though your question's kind of loaded up there with sort of in the form of, given the fact that I'm right, do you still hold the opposite position?
Well,
so, I mean, it's sort of and sort of.
Well, let me rephrase it then. I apologize. Let's just say we're going to deal with the official Council of Trent, the diaries of the Fathers, in regards to this issue. Your position is that the 44% vote had to do with the canon. Am I correct?
It had to do with the canon in that it related to whether or not this was going to have an anathema attached, whether it was going to be a dogmatic definition.
Okay, even though this wasn't part of the official voting or even part of the council itself, you still believe that this 44% vote had to do with the canon?
I think there's two separate questions there. One question is the binding authority of the vote. And I'm certainly open to the idea that this vote was not as significant as people have said it was. I'm open to that idea. I haven't seen any evidence of it, but it was quite definitely a vote that related to the canon through the anathema.
Okay, I'll move on to another question. I don't want to beat a dead horse.